right. Good morning. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine with Brian McNicoll, and we're a day earlier than normal.
And an hour earlier than normal.
And an hour, that's right.
It's the normal time because of
that's true.
Difficulty. I would like to say hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, dog-faced pony soldiers, and chumps.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Joe, for giving us chumps.
Kind of one that rhymes with the candidate's your opponent's last name. I don't know. So all my Trump people are on there. Trump's. That's us, baby. Landslide 2020.
Well, we shall see. All right. So we are now 7 days. 7 days away from the election.
A week away.
Yeah. And but still a lot's happening. I want to talk about what happened last night, which was Amy Coney Barrett now being getting her confirmation vote in and being sworn in as a associate justice of the Supreme Court over the Democrats' many objections. But it was a great moment. It may be one of the defining moments of the Trump administration. I mean, particularly coming so late in the campaign like this and all that. But so what's your feeling about all the stuff that's gone down here with all that?
Well, a few things. One is there is no way that this would have gone through as smoothly as it did if the public polling that you're seeing that shows Biden ahead by 8 points and 10 points and all this stuff were true. If those polls were true, Republican senators would have held this up, and there would have been enough objections to block the vote because they've been trying to save their own skins. They're all comfortable that the way to win next week is to support Trump now, and that's what happened. So, he was voted in 52 to 48, or she was voted in 52 to 48. The only Republican to go against her was Susan Collins. The habit in the past has been to sort of let Susan Collins do what she has to do to, remain a senator from Maine. The perception is Maine is a left-leaning state, and for a Republican senator to keep winning re-election there, she has to be less Republican, sort of, so to speak. This time, I actually think it's going to work against her. I think people are looking for, people who stand up for the party and the president and what we believe in. And I think that the capitulation is going to be, show that she's not really that person. If you want a Republican, you need to run an actual Republican. She was in some electoral trouble before, and I don't think it got better after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point there with her. It's just that considering that she was the lone Republican to do so, right. It's one thing if you join again with Murkowski or Romney or somebody like that, but the fact that you stood out alone, yeah. I do think that stands a good chance of working against her and becoming a big negative rather than a positive. And the Republicans, I think, as to your early point here, yeah, they would not have done this. I mean, Lindsey Graham, apparently, he's in a battle. Joni Ernst is in a battle. A lot, Ron Johnson, Cory Gardner's in a battle. Martha McSally's in a battle. So we have a lot of people that are fighting for their political lives. And, this took away some time on the campaign, but it also gave them a chance to showcase themselves a little bit too, and to stand up and say, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. So, pushing this through, doing this, I think was absolutely the right thing. And just watching the Democrats' reaction only makes it more so, in my opinion. I mean, Chuck Schumer, the darkest days of the Senate in 231 years. What is that? It's dark days if you're the liberals, because right. You've now got 6 people who probably will vote, against you fairly consistently.
Right. Well, 5.
At least 5. The 6 is,
Hey, that's the other thing is, so, she was sworn onto the court by Clarence Thomas, not the Chief Justice. And I don't think that was an accident. I don't think the chief was busy golfing or anything. I think that was a signal that the axis of power in the court is changing, because now what happens is if as long as Roberts is siding with the majority, he assigns who writes the opinion and so forth. If he is siding with the minority, which may become increasingly the case, then the person, the most senior justice who sides with the majority, assigns the opinions, and that's Clarence Thomas. So in a big way, a big loser yesterday was John Roberts. His power, his light got much dimmer in Washington with Judge Barrett on the court.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about, Ginsburg, when she died, she was what, 87? Barrett is what, 48?
Yeah.
Are we looking at 40 years potentially of
Could
Amy?
be 40 years on the court. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just her, but Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, but they might not. They're all there for 30. All three of them are there for 30 at least. And Trump in a second term likely gets a chance to replace Thomas, and possibly Alito as well. So it'll be a strong hand for a long time.
Yes, that's one thing I wanted to, since you mentioned it. Do you think that if Trump wins re-election, that at some point Clarence Thomas will then step down to allow a younger successor to come in there, conservative, to once again push forward for another 30 plus years?
Yeah, my understanding is it would not even be all that long that he is ready to retire for a number of reasons. He has a bus, he owns a bus, and when he's not working, him and his wife get in the bus and go all over the country. And he wants to go ride that bus. He's done this a long time. He's given a lot of service to the country, and he's ready for some bus trips.
Does he have a John Madden fear of flying? Is that why he's got a bus?
I think they just like the convenience of it.
Yeah. Go where you want, when you want, right?
Yeah.
It's your schedule, not someone else's necessarily.
Yeah.
Well, more power to him then on that. But yeah, I think, part of the argument from some conservatives about the Barrett, nomination confirmation is that it takes away a little bit of the impetus or just the necessity of reelecting Trump, because he's now put such an imprint on the court. But I think, the other thing that since we have older justices that are on the conservative side, you still need that. You want the imprint. You want him to go in there and then tell get the older justices that if they want to step aside and get people who are good 20 years or 25 years
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And do that. Right. And so this, a second Trump term could be unbelievable in the sense of what it does to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, really
to historic
you could end up
levels.
with about a 7-2 majority, not counting Roberts as among the two.
Right.
Or I guess it can't get any worse than 3 because they have
Kagan and Sotomayor.
Sotomayor.
Right? So
still a solid 6 votes. You're going to win most everything you need to win.
Right. No, that would be.
Now, I do want to say that because the people who watch, so you understand, this does not mean that Roe v. Wade is gone in the next 6 months. Right. The task on Roe v. Wade remains to come forward with a legal theory that overcomes that legal theory. And, unless that happens, the court won't even take the case, let alone rule in the favor of overturning Roe. So, that's not like an immediate, you saw the women on leftist checkmark blue checks last night, my uterus is dead and all this stuff. Your uterus is fine and probably for the conceivable future, right? But election law, you can already see the courts pushing back on, we can vote for another couple of weeks past next Tuesday and still count it. And you're starting to see real ID being upheld and so forth. So there are changes that affect us that will be good, but Roe is probably still in the distance.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. The liberals, the leftists, they've been pushing this narrative that she gets on the court, Roe v. Wade is dead, but you need a case to be brought to the court, and for them to actually decide that they will take that case. And that is not a given. They're not going to they don't take every case that is brought to them.
Right.
So therefore, it'll be quite a while before this probably gets addressed. It definitely, unlikely that it'll happen within at least Barrett's first term. You know,
Right. I mean, it's probably, I mean, I try to follow this pretty closely, and I have not seen anybody who has a legal theory they think can overcome the reasoning of Roe. So, if you start seeing that, you'll start seeing it being discussed, and Federalist Society and people like that dealing with it at conferences, and will this work, and what needs to be done to it, and so forth. But you're not even seeing that yet. So, my inkling is it'll be a long time before Roe is overturned.
Yeah, I mean, this will definitely give conservatives some more energy to try to figure this out.
Right.
But once again, it's not a guarantee that it will happen. Knowing that they probably have a minimum of 5 votes on this, they have enough to win this, that they would probably try to figure a way. But it's not like you can just develop this theory to take it down right away. This is
right, and she won't help you,
right.
And Kavanaugh won't help you. They're not going to do this for us.
Right.
Right. If you come up with something, they will look at it in a way that a liberal justice would not have, but they're not going to give it to you.
Right. So now you brought up this voting issue. I wanted to couch it also in the sense that we now have over 60 million people have voted early, either by mail or in person. There was about 60 million or so, I think, voted 4 years ago, and it's in the entirety of early, of the early voting. This year we've obviously, the pandemic has, some of the, lots of things have happened where there's a lot more emphasis towards the mail-in balloting, absentee balloting type of thing like that. A lot more time seems to be devoted to early voting, so people can spread that out a little bit. The early voting, I mean, everywhere, everything I've seen on the news is that everywhere you go, the lines have been pretty darn long everywhere. There's a huge demand, for people. They really do want to cast their vote. I don't know. I mean, do you see the vote total, which was about 137 million 4 years ago, going to 145, 150 or more?
Yeah, I think most people are saying it could be 150 million. I also am reading things that, this is not coming out like Democrats thought it would, that they're lagging, Florida, Wisconsin, North Carolina. They're not getting the results they want. They thought, like, for instance, in Florida, there was a big Democrat edge at vote by mail, right? So all these ballots came in, Democrats were ahead. And then when in-person early voting started, it was swamped by Republicans. So, like, Republicans are ahead, not by much, by like 1,000, 2,000 votes, maybe, in Miami-Dade County. They're right at ahead. They're like within 1,000 votes in Palm Beach County. If that holds, Florida will be an avalanche for Trump, right? They have to have those counties. Democrats have to have. I think Hillary had won Miami-Dade by 30 points last time. So for Biden to be behind in a place where she won by 30 points, does not bode well. I think sometime today in Florida, they were gaining. Republicans were gaining an in-person early voting at a rate of 5,000 votes per hour that the polls were open. They were catching up to the vote by mail totals at the rate of 5,000 an hour yesterday. That's up. It had been about 6,000, about 5,000 a half hour yesterday. It had been about 6,000 an hour. So that the pace at which Republicans are overtaking Democrats in Florida is catching up, and they should go past them for good today. And Democrats have already spent in Florida almost 80% of their vote. So, once it gets to election day, there's virtually no one left to vote but Republicans. In Wisconsin, Republican votes are coming in about as expected, but Democrat votes are coming in at way less than expected. And Republicans actually have a fairly substantial early edge there. Where else were we going to talk about? Pennsylvania, it's coming in at far above expectations for Republicans. So, the thought that, they could win this in the early voting and the mail-in voting and all that so forth is not materializing to this point.
Yeah, and I correct me if I'm wrong here too. Didn't in the last few years too? I mean, the Republicans made a lot of headway with Republican registration in Pennsylvania
Right.
and I guess in Florida. So, yeah, at the beginning, the Democrats, it looked like everything I was seeing showed that the Democrats were getting a pretty substantial lead edge on Democrat versus Republican ballots coming in. But just like you said, I mean, this is reversing now that there's more of the in-person voting in a lot of these areas, and things are tightening up quite a bit. And then, as you alluded to earlier about the Supreme Court getting involved in these voting cases in terms of when they can count ballots, the Wisconsin thing, I was very happy to see that, particularly after the Pennsylvania ruling that they had just previous to that, so that Wisconsin cannot, they have to have their ballots into the election office by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. None of this extended thing, where Governor Evers, they wanted to extend it up to like 2 weeks or whatever because of the pandemic. The pandemic has been a huge excuse the Democrats have been trying to use to try to stuff this and change this. I've also heard now too, because of with Barrett now on the court, and I guess there'll be another swearing in today, but that that the Republicans are scrambling to potentially try to bring the Pennsylvania thing back.
Right.
And
went in on it the first time. I don't know. I don't know what all the rules are on that, but that does deserve another look. I don't know because, and the reason I say that is not because hurt my side or whatever.
Yeah.
But because my understanding of this, and some lawyers should jump in and tell us if we're wrong, is that the courts have deferred to the states on this, except in the case of letting you go too far past election day, turning it in, right? And that's the one thing they've kind of said, the Constitution says first Tuesday after the first Monday. It doesn't say plus a week or whatever. So I'm trying to figure out like what was the principle? What about the Pennsylvania law made it where you could get a different ruling out of what looks to me like the same facts as all these other people who have lost? How did Pennsylvania win when they all lost?
Yeah, I mean it obviously has something to do with the pandemic. I mean, plus the fact you have a Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, which is the liberal group there. On top of that, you definitely
right.
see.
And their first thing has been to defer to state law unless it was clearly unconstitutional.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Republicans can do that. I mean, they have less than 7 days, really, in essence, to make that happen. But it's possible. I mean,
it's more time than you think. But
they'll try to push this through. But and the court, they will take these emergency appeals and things like that if they think they need to hear this. So this will be interesting to see how this all works out for that. But that's definitely one of the things that bothers me, is the idea that states are trying to extend their deadlines as to when they can count the votes.
Right. It may have backfired a little bit on Pennsylvania because the president or Vice President Biden saying in the last debate that he wanted to end fossil fuel production in the United States, apparently, according to Rasmussen, added 2 points to Trump and took 4 points away from Biden. So it's not exactly, it sounds like a 6-point swing. It's not quite that because, a lot of those people are going to just not vote and maybe they wouldn't have voted anyway and so forth. But that's a big swing. And like the polling out today shows Trump up to almost 5 points ahead in Pennsylvania. So, it made a big jump deal. And if you get it to 5 points, 6 points, then, things on the side, like when late mail-in ballots come in, are less of a factor.
Yeah. All right. Now, I know you have some strong opinions about this topic, which is COVID-19. But we are seeing, I mean, at least their news reports are showing, we're getting daily reports of, big spikes across the country in daily cases. There are, I've said many, many times on this program, when I'm at the gym in the morning, CNN is basically directly in front of me. And so I have to read the closed captions, but I can, the chyrons are always like, hospitals are in crisis, all of this stuff. The Democrats are definitely trying to use the cases on all these other things and, the continued, upward tick in deaths, which we knew we were going to get there every day, that some people were going to be dying. So the numbers are continuing, being used as a bludgeon, trying to blunt instrument against Trump for everything that's going on there. Plus you have Hillary, who said, she was born for this on top of this. She's still stewing over 2016, but we have her commenting on this as well. But I mean, what are your thoughts about this and its effect on President Trump? They've been criticizing him for saying we've been rounding the corner. There's threats there. Chicago the suburbs are maybe going to go back and pull back about indoor dining. Lots of things out there.
Right. It's politically driven. I think we'll be a lot better shape on COVID this time next week, just supposing, once we get past this election. The positive test per 250,000, there is no spike. In fact, it continues to trend downward. Hospitalizations, there is no spike. In fact, it continues to trend downward. Deaths, there is no spike. In fact, it continues to trend downward. CDC came out today and said 60% of the cases of the reported deaths from COVID probably were not from COVID, but from the flu and other things, and miscategorized for a variety of reasons. Some good faith got it wrong. Some you get more money for COVID. So we don't really know what we have. I also think it's interesting that it doesn't appear to be moving the needle anymore. Paul Sperry had a thing out earlier this week where he was saying that he had polling that showed that people have quit responding to the COVID scares. Like people say uptick, it used to be, it moved the polls toward Biden, it made everybody uptight. And now people are looking at it and saying, we've been doing this long enough to where, people can tell when they're getting, things run at them, right? So, and I think that's kind of the case here. Is Democrats fall behind, they pull, the only play they really think they have in their playbook, and start talking about COVID again. But it's election politics and really nothing more. You're right. We knew some cases once we started opening up and letting people get out, you were going to have more people contact each other and a few more cases. But these people aren't sick and they're not dying, and we can't act as if they are.
Yeah, I think even CNN, while they were doing the reporting, the one huge hole in all of this push against Trump and trying to hype the virus was just that the deaths have not really increased, on the average for the last couple months. So they
stubbornly refused to cooperate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I mean, they had that, and they couldn't couch that in a way to put that in context with the rest of the stuff. So, probably one of the biggest things that you have to work on, which is number of deaths. The death rate has not, number of deaths have not changed. So, that I think that takes away a lot of the ammunition as to how this has been done overall. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, it's been highly politicized. I mean, on the program that I do on Friday nights, I did ask the group that was with us about COVID fatigue, and they all, I mean, they're all conservatives, but they all felt that, we've been in this thing for 7 months. I think we've read and heard about as much as we need to hear and can absorb, and we've tried to educate ourselves as best as we can. But how much more can the media do trying to beat us over the head with the number of deaths and the number of cases and things like that, and just put out this doomsday scenario that if we don't do something now, I mean, former FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, I mean, he's saying that it's time, he said in the Journal the other day, it's time for a national mask mandate. They're doing all these things, but most people know that the masks aren't really all that protective to begin with. They're not really effective, in all of this. So it's just, there's so many problems with all of this that go on here. It's like, how much more can the American public take? And, are you saying too, in terms of after next Tuesday, that because the election will be over, COVID as a news item will have lost a lot of its effectiveness?
A lot less use as an issue for Democrats. Republicans aren't raising it now. They're just trying to go back to work and school and live their life. It's Democrats who keep bringing this up and up and up and up. And, if you watch CNN or MSDNC for any period of time, 70% of their content is, hammering on the COVID fear and the COVID threat and the COVID this and that and the other. And it's not our lived experience. The other thing I see on my social media is a lot of people saying, does anyone on here know anyone who has had COVID or died of COVID? And I always come on and say, well, I had it, but it wasn't all that big a deal. But, that's one of the things that goes on here is, there's this, half of the side, all they're hearing is that, fear, 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 stay at home, pull the covers over your head so nothing bad happens to you, and the other side are like, nothing bad's really happening. Can we just go back to what we were doing? Can we make this where this is people's choice, right? Because right now it's, it's the government, and, you have people like Scott Gottlieb, like you said, they want more government dictating our behavior on this, more government intervention in our lives. And I think, we've gotten to the point where, we've really, gotten a good commercial for the benefits of small government over the last few months. And people can see that, having some control over your life is more important than you thought it was.
Does this make, what's your view of Gottlieb as the FDA commissioner? Was he good? Or, he spent about 2 years in the administration?
Yeah, he didn't make a lot of news until he got out of it, right? But he's an activist guy. He's on that side. He prevented more progress than he enabled.
So one person that has, I guess, maybe I could classify him, or we could classify him as making his own decisions or having some courage here, would be Vice President Pence, because he had several members of his staff, including his chief of staff, test positive for COVID, for which, a lot of people came after him and said, well, he needs to isolate. He has to stop campaigning and do all of these things, but he's not.
That's the thing. No, you don't. You go, he gets tested every day, right? Those guys, it must, think about it. Trump and Pence are completely over someone coming up to them every day and sticking a Q-tip way into the back of their nose. You don't live like that, but every day someone does that to Pence, and Pence sits silently in a chair and lets them do it. And they test it and he's negative, right? And so, see, that's a good example of this. It's like, there's no 2 weeks of sitting around doing nothing. That's what they tried to do to Trump when Trump caught it, right? It's like, oh, now you've got to sit in this room for 2 weeks so you don't endanger anybody. He's like, I'm not endangering anybody, right? And he's not. He hasn't endangered anybody. So, the idea that like we have to cordon ourselves off like this, it's not true. Only a small percentage of the people who have COVID are spreaders, can spread it at all. So, and we don't really know how to determine which is which. And, while you have it, while you're an active case, I can see staying home. But this notion that 2-3 weeks later, you still need to be under your covers, no, that's nonsense. They tried to visit that onto Trump, and he recognized that it wasn't true. And he went out and proved that it wasn't true. He was back rallying. He was riding around waving at the people on Rockville Pike. He took these matters into his own hands. And now the whole country's view of COVID started to change then. And people started saying, okay, it's not a death sentence, right? We shouldn't be treated like one. Here's a 73-year-old overweight guy, who licked it in 3 days.
Yeah, can we say that the media's description of that White House event as a super spreader event is basically winds up being fake news in the end?
Yeah, it's macabre, and they have no idea where people got this or what caused it and so forth.
Because they were pointing to last night's thing with Barrett, now, and a lot of people were wearing masks for what the pictures I could see, for that type of a thing like that. But it looks like they're ready to pounce again, like, oh, they're gathering on the White House lawn, here it goes again, kind of a thing, like, just kind of wait and see. I don't think that's going to be any worse than anything else, and you had a lot more people wearing masks this time around, right? Going through that. So,
right. And the thing about the mask is, it's, I think we've come to, it's not that they quote don't work. We don't know how well they work, right? But we don't know. What we do know now is they're not a silver bullet, right? Everybody, all these people, like 80% of the people who have caught COVID in the last 6 months were regular mask wearers. They were out wearing the mask. They were out doing the thing. That doesn't mean that they caught it from wearing the mask, but they didn't. It wasn't prevented by the mask.
Right, and it's not it's not a scientific study by any means. So we have to wear masks when we go to the gym, and I'll say that actually I'm sure I would probably say like 99% of the people there do wear the mask over their nose. When I get on the elliptical, it goes below my nose because I want to breathe. And unless
Right.
somebody complains, I'm usually there early enough that there's only a handful of us anyway. But I notice that there are a few others that also on the ellipticals that, we just keep it just below so we can breathe better. But we've been doing this for almost 4 months. There has been, the gym is still open, it's still functioning. There's no cases that I know of that have been a result of that. I'm not saying that not wearing the mask would still be equally as good, but I kind of feel that if we've been breathing for a certain period of time and nothing really has happened within that, I think that the effectiveness of the mask need to be called into question. But it's a health rule of county rules is that you got to do that. But I also noticed that the gym personnel, they don't check you as often unless somebody really complains. They let you make your own decision as to exactly how you'll go about and do your workout one way or the other. So I want to lead into here to Trump and his rallies. He's been zigzagging the country. He's going to be pushing it. Now, to me, I don't see the media covering these rallies, wall to wall like they used to. And when they do cover them, they want to look, what they're focusing on, that we're looking for is people who aren't masked at the rallies, even though they're outside, and considering them, once again, they love the word super spreader. They want to blame the Trump campaign for spreading the virus.
These events
everywhere.
have not been super spreaders. They've traced almost no COVID cases to these rallies, right? And they're all over the country. He's doing 3 a day, and they're about 2 hours apiece. And then he goes somewhere else, and they set it all up again. He's talking to 50 to 100,000 people in person every day, and his opponent is hiding in the basement. That makes a ginormous difference. Of the people he's talking to, a quarter to 40% are not Republican. 20 to 35% have never voted before, which means they cannot be polled. This is their entry into politics. And so, your eyes do not deceive you, right? There's a huge political movement going on in this country. He had 14,000 people in Allentown, Pennsylvania yesterday. The rally was announced Sunday night. They announced one Sunday night. They have it Monday at 1 in the afternoon, and he gets 14,000 people. So Joe heard about this, right? There was 3 rallies in Pennsylvania yesterday. There was one in Martinsville, and there was one in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, and there was one which is up at northeast Pennsylvania, right? So, by the way, those counties, Lackawanna, Luzerne, the counties up in the north, and the Poconos and so forth, have flipped to Trump, right, in recent days, because he's spent a lot of time up there, and he's showed them some love and so forth. That was part of why Biden thought he was ahead, as those, the eastern part of the state was pretty closely, was close to being Biden country. But, Trump's kind of broken that hold. The fracking remark was deadly for that purpose. But, he's got 3 more today. He's going all over the place. He does them in airports, so he doesn't, it doesn't really take any time. Most of these places he goes, he lands at the airport, gives the speech, gets back on the plane, goes somewhere else. Huge rallies, huge, outside of these things. There's more people outside of many of them than there are inside. So yesterday, Joe heard about it, right? And so, they were going to call a lid until the election. Their intent was not to appear in public anymore before the election, but they said, okay, if Trump's doing all this in Pennsylvania, you got to get out there, Joe. And he was standing on the side of the street yelling at people who didn't realize who he was and just getting passed by. I mean, the footage is awful. And then, I don't know, I guess you saw the footage of Kamala. She's standing across a big street from a people lined up to vote, right? And she's got one of those little stand-up microphone dealios, with the little speaker, portable PA system, and she starts talking into this thing, and she's begging people, please vote for Joe and all this stuff. And people are saying, hey, that's electioneering. You're talking to people in line to vote. You can't really do that, But it's just like this pathetic woman standing across the street yelling at the voters. It's like a bag lady almost. And so, I mean, it's not going well for them. And they have to really pick their spots where to send her, because she has been really poorly received. And, I don't know if you saw her 60 Minutes interview with, she was asked, what do you, you're the most liberal person in the Senate. She's like, no, really. These people who count this stuff say you are the most liberal senator. Are you for socialism? It's like, people don't want to see, they want a straight answer to that question, because that's still a label that carries some freight in this country. And, there's not a big part of the American electorate who's willing to say, yes to socialism, and yes, I support the socialist candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give Nora O'Donnell credit for asking that question. I mean, she was basically citing the GovTrack survey, the information on this. This was not ACU or anything like this. Yeah, and then she does that cackle that Harris does to try to just try to dodge this whole issue. But asking, when she says, well, I'm going to give Joe Biden my complete perspective. And that set her up. So, well, is that a socialist or progressive perspective? And then she tries to laugh that off, but she doesn't adequately answer the question. She never gave an answer to that. She just brought up her background, Jamaican and Black Indian and all this kind of stuff and all of these things. And then she goes, well, and what do you want to know? But it's like, no, what we want to know is, do you have are you going to cater to the socialist progressive wing if you get elected? My part of my problem is just something different. It's kind of, to me, sometimes when I hear her, I feel it's like it's fingernails on a chalkboard. That voice,
say that.
It was funny too, because I didn't realize it until just really recently. I mean, how many times have I heard her at the Kavanaugh hearings and the debates, but only within the last couple of weeks, because I've seen a lot more of her, on the stump. I'm like, oh, 4 to 8 years of this will drive me nuts. And
luckily, that doesn't seem to be a danger anymore.
Yeah. I like the optimism. What about this thing that Biden said the other day too, that we built the largest voter fraud organization in American political history. Is this?
I think he means anti-voter fraud. I think he was taken out of context, but I mean, Trump says something like that. It's he never gets a chance to explain about the context. So, Joe shouldn't either. And there is a lot of voter fraud out there, and it does look kind of organized, which sort of feeds into that suspicion. But they have there's some questions about them now that they got to answer on that front.
All right. What about this other thing? This comment from Van Jones, for which Van Jones got pilloried for by the left, where he defended Trump on Friday night with Jake Tapper, telling him, well, look, he's like, I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, but when it comes to, he's done good stuff for the Black community, the crime, all this crime reform and all these kinds of things. And, that's not what Jake Tapper wanted to hear. That's not what the liberal left wanted to hear. I mean, people on Twitter were like, oh, you're a sellout and all these kinds of things. Van Jones is no sellout. He is a liberal, he's not a Trumper by any stretch of imagination. There were people on Twitter that are actually calling him a Trumper. No, he's not a Trumper, but he
has a record of saying truths that make them angry when he thinks that's what they are, right? He said the night Trump was elected, he was the one who's like, well, he worked harder. He went to Wisconsin. He didn't take things for granted. It's like, you got to give him some credit, back then. And so I wasn't really surprised that he said that. And I also think that, I think he's right. I think he has a point.
Well, I mean, and this is also, Van Jones, does he not fall into that category with, say, Kanye or Ice Cube, some of these other, the Black rappers and things like that are supporting Trump for various reasons? Also, because either the justice initiatives, working on crime reform and all this kind of stuff, or like 50 Cent, or 50 Cent.
Don't want to get turned into 20 Cent.
Yeah, don't want to get.
Here's the thing though. It's like, he gave money to the, I would say he gave it, he got money appropriated to the HBCUs, right?
Right.
The crime bill and so forth. But you know what seems to be the one that's actually working for him is jobs. It's like there's high paying jobs. These people are like, I could not make money the way things were set up before Trump, but now there's jobs, in my wheelhouse that I can get that pay pretty well, that I can make it and climb up a little bit. And, there's a lot of, when you drill down, when you listen to what these, Black Trump voters talk about, it's jobs. It's, my economic situation got a lot better. And it seemed like it was because of things the president did. They don't look at it as, he helped the Black community. They look at it as he helped me. I got better. My situation got better.
And this is one of the things, with the Black and Latino community, this is the big thing. If Trump improves his percentages with those communities, then he definitely wins, because he takes away the votes from the Democrats. He definitely can win this thing,
right? And what you're getting in these early results is, a lot of there's Rasmussen said the other day that he was up to 46% Black support. It's probably not that high, but he is, you figure he won with 8 last year. It ain't going to be 8, right? It's going to be, you got to figure 15. Could be, it's hard to believe that he won't at least double his Black support, which turns states like Virginia to Democrats. So Trump is up 1 point in Virginia. Gade, our Republican Senate candidate, is up 1 point on Mark Warner. Mark Warner is buying TV commercials like crazy in the Washington market. Now, why is Mark Warner advertising in the Washington market, right?
Yeah.
Those are gimmies, right? That's supposed to be a gimme, but it's not a gimme anymore.
Yeah. So, wasn't that supposed to be Mark Warner's retirement fund too?
Yeah. Mark Warner got rich on pagers. No one has a pager anymore. So Mark, he's got to come up with a new grift, But
well, that's amazing, because I'll pivot to this, because one of the things about this is the my concern here about the Senate, and we'll wrap up fairly shortly here, is just that we have the huge cash advantage that the Democrats have had in this election cycle. Biden has been flush with cash and all of this, and they've been blitzing the TV. I don't know how much an effect that will have, but I read that Susan Collins, $42 million behind her challenger. Martha McSally, 33 million. Tillis, 25 million, Ernst, 23 million. That's a lot of money to be behind in very tight races. I think a lot of these people I think some of them can still I think Ernst and Tillis can still pull this out. McSally and then we talked about Collins.
McSally's ahead. McSally's like 3 or 4 points ahead. They've got a couple problems there. One is the Trump's put a lot of energy into Arizona. Him or surrogates are in Arizona almost every day. Kelly, a picture turned up of Kelly dressed as Hitler, right? Mark Kelly dressed as Hitler. So that hasn't helped him. Buzz Aldrin endorsed McSally over his fellow astronaut, right? So, that's turned toward McSally. I expect her to win now.
Yeah, Spencer sent me one of the ads against Kelly, and it was him, in space, and talk about how he's been bought by China and stuff like that.
Right.
This may turn the tide. Who knows? We really don't know yet, but it's kind of interesting to see how some of these races have been tightening up to the fact and maybe going a little bit to Republicans. I don't really know with the polling how we're doing, because it has been such an unusual year. And traditional campaigning hasn't been able to take effect, and traditional polling can only go so far. And obviously, we'll know more in a little over a week. I'm not sure that, even when we come back next Wednesday, how much we'll know. In terms of the presidency and some of the tighter races, and with ballot harvesting in California, there's a lot of things that have happened before. But anyway, in the time remaining here, just one more.
One thing we talked about is this Biden, his son, a little bit of information got out there,
Right.
about,
Well, that was the thing. I wanted to ask you about Bobulinski in terms of what he said. The Wall Street Journal did a very interesting op-ed yesterday, but talking about the difference between the news and the opinion section, and they basically took they defended Kim Strassel in her op-ed piece about the whole Biden emails and laptops and things like this, and pointed out, he says, it's like Strassel never said that Biden had admitted that he was going to be how deep he was into this. Bobulinski is basically and there's no one has denied that these emails are not true, and so the news side has been taking up more of the the Biden defense team kind of a thing like this. But how do you see this? I don't know that it's going to have that much an effect late in the game, but the thing is that if Biden wins re-election, or if Biden wins the election, does any of this, does this stuff just get buried?
I think that I think if Biden were to win the election, he would open his term under investigation, and how far it would go would depend on who was doing it and what the political pressure was. But the guilt here is not hard to establish, and I guess Bobulinski is going to go on Tucker Carlson and basically show all his cards tonight. He should not, in my view, spend any more time behind closed doors meeting with the FBI. I thought that was a very bad move on his part last week. You're basically giving them ammo with which to protect Biden, which is what they have done with the information they had so far. You had a year ago, right, last September 2019, the FBI came into possession of this laptop, this hard drive, this information, right, that shows Biden connected to Chinese, shaking down foreign governments for payoffs, for Hunter doing it on behalf of his dad, clear links that the money goes to the dad and the dad is calling the shots and all this, email Hunter saying that, I have to give half my money to my dad. And, so, I mean, he's pretty clearly implicated in this. Also, there is some child porn on there, right? There are some kids on there, pictures undressed. There's Hunter what appears to be having sex with underage people. Okay, so that's a pretty cut and dried. I mean, if you look at it, it's nauseating, and there's not a lot of question about what's going on there. So my thing is that the FBI said its top guy, its top child abuse guy, child porn guy, named Joshua Wilson, to get that laptop and go get the hard drive and go through the content. And, he's done nothing with it for a year. So to me, part of, when we move forward on this should be, he goes to prison. You have that evidence for a year and you let this child molester stay on the streets, you go to prison. You are behind bars. That's despicable what this man has done. And he'll say he's doing it under orders, but what did we do with Lieutenant William Calley, right? We didn't put up with under orders from him, and we should not from this guy. I suspect that November 4th, Chris Wray cleans out his desk, Gina Haspel cleans out her desk, Bill Barr cleans out his desk. I think you're going to see many new faces in the FBI, Department of Justice, CIA in the second Trump term. And I think it's a welcome development. The people who ran it became insular and convinced of their own excessive worth or whatever. And it's time for them to go.
All right, because I am short on time. The 2 minutes is now 1 minute. What's your final?
2 minutes is now 1 minute. Let me see what is on here. Oh, yeah, World Series. We're coming down to one game. Tampa Bay. It's 3-2 Dodgers now. I would love to see Tampa Bay somehow come back and win the whole thing. I think that would be a great story. It's something that would, make 2020 a little more endearing.
All right. And your election predictions on the presidency, the Senate, and the House?
Trump, and we win both houses of Congress, and it's not all that close. We know it all on election night. I think a red landslide is coming. Like the polling information and the early return stuff that I'm seeing indicates that it will be a huge night for Republicans.
All right. I love the optimism. I'm going to be a little more pessimistic. I'll go Trump with 280. I'll stick to that interactive thing I posted yesterday for fun. So I think I'll give Trump a victory, squeezing by there. I think the Senate, I'm still gonna go with the Senate of the Republicans will lose 2, and then the House. Boy, the House is going to be tough. I think the momentum is shifting that we actually might go. We actually might gain some seats. I'm not sure we're going to gain enough, but I'm going to go +7 for the House for Republicans because I think the momentum is shifting for them, which is bolder than I would have done a couple of weeks ago. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You'll see this on delay, and we'll get it up there as soon as we can on Facebook and whatever. Please stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anybody ever tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we will see you after the election with whatever results we have, because I really don't know. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Switch.